This is not a lesson. It is not a lecture. It is a journey through questions, through time, through thought. If you've ever wondered who you are, or why the world is the way it is, you're in the right place. This is the Tunnel of Sane, where the mind begins to listen. Philosophy begins not with answers, but with the aching birth of a question. Not in the temples of priests, nor in the declarations of kings, but in a whisper that arises in every thinking soul. Why? Long before laboratories and libraries, before courts and creeds, there were human beings gazing at the stars, marveling at rivers, trembling before life, and wondering what it all meant. What is this world? Who am I within it? What does it mean to live well? These are not luxuries of thought. They were necessities, born from hunger, from grief, from joy, from death. Philosophy emerged not to decorate the mind, but to defend the soul. It began in open air, in the streets of Athens, in the solitude of caves by firelight and sea foam. Not with dogma, but with dialogue. Not with belief, but with inquiry. It questioned everything: love, power, truth, the gods themselves. And those who dared to question often paid the price. But in that questioning, they built something immortal. Welcome to the story of philosophy, a journey not of dry logic, but of fire and light. This is part 1. From Socrates to Spinoza, a path through reason, rebellion, and revelation. We begin not with a monument, but with a barefoot man walking the streets. Chapter 1. Socrates, the martyr of reason. Athens, city of marble, music, and minds. In its crowded marketplaces, among poets and merchants, walked a strange figure. He owned no land, wrote no books, taught no doctrines. He simply asked questions. This man was Socrates. He was not beautiful, not wealthy, not mighty, yet his presence disturbed the powerful and inspired the young. For he had one dangerous gift, the art of making people think. To Socrates, wisdom was not about having knowledge. It was about knowing how little you truly knew. He believed every soul had a seed of truth within it, and that truth could be drawn out, not forced in. He compared his role to that of a midwife, helping others give birth to understanding. He would approach strangers and friends alike with deceptively simple questions. What is justice? What is courage? What is love? And slowly, through calm and relentless dialogue, their certainties would unravel. To the proud, he was a threat. To the youth, he was a beacon. To the city, he became a mirror, and not all mirrors are welcome. He never lectured. He never claimed to know, but in revealing the ignorance of others, he revealed the blindness of a whole society. Eventually, Athens, fearing its own reflection, turned on him. He was put on trial. The charges, corrupting the youth and denying the gods of the state. But Socrates did not beg. He did not run. He stood before the court and said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." They sentenced him to death. And so, surrounded by his students, he drank the hemlock, his mind clear, his voice calm. In his final hours, he spoke not of fear, but of the soul, not of hatred, but of harmony. He met death not as a victim, but as a philosopher. His life became his teaching, his death a testament. Socrates wrote nothing, and yet his words live on, carried by the pen of a grieving student who would reshape thought itself. That student was Plato. Chapter 2. Plato, the architect of the ideal. Plato witnessed the fall of a giant. He saw Athens kill its wisest voice. And in that act, he saw something terrifying, that the many can be wrong, that democracy, without wisdom, can destroy truth. He turned away from politics and toward philosophy, and what he found would change the course of Western thought. Plato believed that this world, the world of sight and sound, is a shadow. Behind it lies a deeper reality, a world not of things, but of ideas, of eternal, perfect forms. You have seen a tree, but have you ever seen treeness? You've experienced justice, but what is justice? Pure and unchanging. Plato believed that these forms were more real than the world we touch. The senses deceive, but the mind, when trained, can glimpse the truth. In his masterpiece, The Republic, he dreamed of a society governed by philosopher kings. Not tyrants, not merchants, but those who loved wisdom above power. He imagined a system where children were raised for the good of all, where education wasn't memorization, but liberation, where rulers were reluctant and power was service. He saw the soul, like the city, as a balance. Reason should guide, spirit should enforce, desire should obey. Only when the soul is ordered can a person be just. Only when reason rules can a society flourish. He distrusted the masses, not out of disdain, but from experience. He had seen a democratic city murder just man. So he turned his focus to education, to thought, to the ideal. But Plato was not just a dreamer. He acted. He founded the academy, the first great university of the Western world, a sanctuary for seekers, a forge for minds. And there, a new thinker emerged, less mystical, more grounded, less enchanted by ideals, and more fascinated by reality itself. His name was Aristotle. Chapter 3. Aristotle, the philosopher of earth and logic. Where Plato soared above the clouds, Aristotle dug his hands into the soil. He was Plato's greatest student, but not his echo. Where Plato saw eternal forms, Aristotle saw concrete things. Where Plato sought perfection beyond this world, Aristotle sought meaning within it. He believed in observation, not just imagination, in causes, not just conclusions. He asked, what is a thing? What is it made of? What is it for? To understand the world, Aristotle said, we must understand its purpose, its final cause. Nothing exists by chance. Everything has a reason for being. He cataloged the natural world, plants, animals, weather, motion. He created categories of knowledge, biology, logic, ethics, metaphysics, rhetoric. He became, in essence, the first encyclopedist. Where Plato dreamed of ideal justice, Aristotle studied existing governments, monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, and asked which worked best and why. He concluded that the best system was a balance, a mixed constitution that avoided the extremes of tyranny and chaos. In ethics, he didn't demand saints or sages. He believed virtue lies in the middle. Courage is the balance between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity walks between stinginess and waste. His ethics weren't based on reward or punishment, but on flourishing. He called it eudaimonia, not happiness as fleeting joy, but as fulfillment of one's nature. To Aristotle, the good life was a life of reason, not cold calculation, but thoughtful action, living in accordance with purpose. He taught that humans are rational animals, but he knew that reason alone wasn't enough. Habit, discipline, and education were essential. While Plato looked to the heavens for truth, Aristotle found it in the patterns of the earth. And his influence spread like fire through time, into Islamic philosophy, Christian theology, and modern science. For centuries, he was known simply as the philosopher. He gave us the tools to think clearly, argue precisely, and understand deeply. And though empires fell, his ideas endured, quietly shaping the very structure of knowledge. Chapter 4. Francis Bacon, the prophet of science. The medieval world was rich in faith, but poor in method. It sang hymns, built cathedrals, and bowed before authority. But it feared the unknown. It studied ancient texts instead of nature. Then came a man who sounded a trumpet, not of war, but of awakening. His name was Francis Bacon. He lived in a time when Europe was trembling with change, exploration, reformation, revolution. He saw that old knowledge could no longer answer new questions. And so, he turned the world upside down, not by denying truth, but by changing how we seek it. Bacon believed that the human mind was shackled by idols, false habits of thought, idols of the tribe, our shared biases, idols of the cave, our personal prejudices, idols of the marketplace, confusion in language, idols of the theater, the blind reverence for tradition. To find truth, we had to tear down these illusions. He proposed a new method, not of guessing, but of testing, not of authority, but of observation. a slow, humble gathering of facts, step by step. This would become the foundation of what we now call the scientific method. He called this vision the novum organum, the new tool. It was a map for inquiry, a lantern for explorers of reality. Bacon didn't conduct experiments himself. He wasn't a lab man, but a visionary. He saw what the future could be, and dared to imagine a civilization built not on superstition, but on knowledge. He believed that knowledge is power, not for control, but for the betterment of human life. He dreamed of research institutions, collaborative discovery, and technologies that would ease suffering. He wrote of a new Atlantis, a utopia governed not by kings or priests, but by scientists and thinkers. A society where learning was sacred and progress was shared. Though he died disgraced and in debt, his legacy would ignite a revolution. Newton, Galileo, Descartes, they would walk the path he paved. Francis Bacon was the philosopher who lit the fuse beneath the age of science. Not with thunder, but with a spark of clarity. Next up will be Chapter 5, Spinoza, the Saint of Reason. In a quiet room in Amsterdam, surrounded by silence and glass, a man polished lenses by day and polished thought by night. His name was Baruch Spinoza. To many, he was a heretic, to some a mystic, but to those who truly read him, he was a philosopher of astonishing depth. Spinoza was excommunicated from his Jewish community at just 23. His ideas were considered too dangerous, too radical. He questioned tradition, reimagined God, and insisted that truth must stand on reason alone. But he held no bitterness, no revenge, only clarity. He believed that God was not a person watching from the heavens, but the very fabric of existence itself. Not a creator outside nature, but the substance of nature itself. For Spinoza, to understand the universe was to understand God, and to live wisely was to live in harmony with the natural laws that govern all things. In his masterwork Ethics, he didn't write like a preacher or a poet, but like a geometer. Axioms, definitions, propositions. He built philosophy as if it were a cathedral of reason. He treated emotions not as mysteries to be feared, but as natural forces like gravity or inertia. He believed we are moved by causes we don't always see, and freedom lies in understanding those causes, not denying them. Love, hatred, joy, sorrow, each had a place in his system. He didn't wish to eliminate emotion, but to illuminate it. For Spinoza, peace came not from illusion or faith, but from knowledge. To understand the necessity of things is to accept them, and in that acceptance, one finds serenity. He lived simply, refused fame, declined offers to teach at prestigious universities. He survived on modest work, grinding glass for microscopes and telescopes. And perhaps, in a metaphorical way, he helped humanity see more clearly. He died young, at 44, but his ideas lived on like light through crystal. Some called him godless, but few have ever written more reverently about the divine. He gave us a God not of thunder, but of reason, a faith not in miracles, but in the harmony of all things. He was, in the truest sense, a saint of the intellect. Chapter 6, Voltaire, the wit of the Enlightenment. If Spinoza whispered reason with serene precision, Voltaire laughed it out loud. Voltaire was lightning, brilliant, fast, and electrifying. He didn't seek to build philosophical systems. He aimed to explode hypocrisy with wit sharper than any sword. Born François-Marie Arouet, he adopted the name Voltaire like a weapon, and he used it with unrelenting force. He lived in an age when kings ruled by divine right and churches silenced dissent. Voltaire did neither. He mocked them both, brilliantly, dangerously, defiantly. He was imprisoned in the Bastille for his sharp tongue, exiled from Paris, but never silenced. For Voltaire, the true enemy was not religion, but fanaticism. Not belief, but cruelty in the name of belief. He cried out again and again, "Ecrases l'infâme," crush the infamous thing, by which he meant intolerance, dogma, and oppression wherever they hid. He was a man of letters, plays, poems, essays, treatises. But it was Candide, his razor-sharp satire, that immortalized his genius. In a world torn by suffering, Voltaire attacked the smug optimism of philosophers who claimed all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Through absurd adventures and brutal misfortunes, he asked, how can we justify this pain? How dare we explain away evil? But Voltaire didn't end in despair. He offered no grand system, just a modest proposal. Let us cultivate our garden. Meaning, let us act. Let us create. Let us tend to the real, the possible, the near. Instead of dreaming up perfect worlds, let us make this one a little less cruel. He was no saint. He was vain, sometimes petty, often brilliant. But he fought with his words for a freer world. He championed civil liberties. He demanded justice for the wrongly condemned. He helped crack open the iron shell of absolutism and shine the first lights of the Enlightenment. Voltaire was not a system builder. He was a breaker of chains. Chapter 7. Immanuel Kant, the Sage of Duty. In the quiet Prussian town of Königsberg, where the streets were orderly and time moved with clockwork regularity, lived a man whose mind would shift the foundations of Western thought. His name was Immanuel Kant. He never ventured far from home. He lived by routine so precise that neighbors could set their clocks by his daily walk. But his thoughts traveled where no philosopher had dared go before. Kant's questions were vast. What can we know? What should we do? Well, may we hope. He stood between two great worlds, rationalism and empiricism, and sought to build a bridge, a middle path between pure reason and raw experience. He proposed something revolutionary, that the mind is not a blank slate, merely receiving impressions from the world. Rather, the mind actively shapes experience. We don't just see the world, we organize it. Space and time, he argued, are not properties of the external world, but structures within us. We don't find them out there. We bring them to perception itself. His great work, Critique of Pure Reason, was a storm of genius. Dense, difficult, dazzling. It marked a turning point before Kant and after Kant. But he did not stop at knowledge. He turned to ethics and asked what it means to act rightly. Kant didn't base morality on consequences or emotion. He built it on duty, on a single principle, the categorical imperative. Act only according to that maxim by which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. In other words, live as if your choices shape the moral law for all humanity. Don't lie, because a world where everyone lies is unlivable. Don't use others as means, but honor them as ends. For Kant, morality was not about reward or punishment. It was about respect for others and for the rational dignity within ourselves. Religion, too, was transformed in his thought. He believed in God, not as a provable being, but as a necessary postulate of moral life. Without immortality, without divine justice, he feared goodness might collapse under cynicism. Kant gave us a universe shaped by reason and bounded by limits. We cannot know things in themselves, he said, only how they appear to us. Yet within that limitation, he carved space for freedom, for responsibility, for awe. He was not a poet, not a prophet, but in his stern precision, he gave philosophy a moral backbone and elevated human dignity to sacred heights. In a world of shifting values, Kant remains a lighthouse of duty, reason, and human worth. Chapter 8. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism. And then, like a shadow after the storm, came Schopenhauer. If Kant showed us the order behind perception, Schopenhauer uncovered the chaos behind existence. He took Kant's framework and turned it inside out. Yes, he said, we see the world through appearance. Yes, the world as we know is shaped by mind. But behind that veil lies not a divine order, but a blind, restless force. He called it will, not reason, not God, but will, irrational, insatiable, ever striving. It pulses in animals, in plants, in the beating of hearts and the turning of stars. It is the force that drives life, but never lets it rest. Desire, he said, is the root of suffering. And since life is endless desire, life is also endless pain. Pleasure is fleeting. Satisfaction is a pause in the hunger, not its cure. And the more we desire, the more we suffer. To live, then, is to struggle. But in that bleakness, Schopenhauer found a strange kind of compassion. He admired Eastern philosophies, especially Buddhism and Hinduism. He believed salvation lies in denying the will, in transcending desire. Through art, we catch glimpses of peace. In music, especially instrumental music, he saw the purest escape, the expression of will without concept, without suffering. In beauty, in contemplation, in acts of kindness, we resist the will. He did not believe in progress. He believed in honesty. And though his worldview was dark, it was never cruel. He saw in suffering the reason for empathy. He urged us to recognize the pain of others, because it is the same pain we carry within. His personality was stormy, prideful, solitary, often caustic. But his words resonated. Writers, poets, artists, especially a young philosopher named Nietzsche, would drink deeply from his well. Schopenhauer stripped philosophy of illusion. He gave it rawness, melancholy, and a terrible beauty. He asked not what we should achieve, but how we should endure. And in doing so, he spoke to the part of us that suffers and seeks peace. Chapter 9. Herbert Spencer, the philosopher of evolution. By the time Herbert Spencer arrived, the world was shifting, not just socially but biologically. Darwin had shaken the tree of life, revealing that species, including humans, were not static creations but products of change, struggle, and time. But Spencer took that insight and magnified it. To him, evolution wasn't confined to nature. It was the law of everything. Societies evolved, languages evolved, ideas evolved, morality evolved. And through this universal unfolding, he believed the cosmos was moving toward complexity, coherence, and refinement. He wasn't just a philosopher, he was a synthesizer. He tried to weave all knowledge, biology, psychology, sociology, ethics, into one grand framework. A total vision of progressive change. He gave us a phrase that would echo across centuries. Survival of the fittest. But where Darwin meant it biologically, Spencer extended it socially. He believed that competition, struggle, and adaptation were not just part of nature, but of human development, economics, and ethics. To Spencer, government should not interfere too much. Just as we do not interrupt evolution in nature, we should not interrupt it in society. Let the strong thrive, he said. Let the weak adapt or perish. To some, this was a harsh doctrine. To others, it was a hopeful one, trusting in nature's wisdom to shape better futures. He imagined humanity progressing ever upward, toward peace, toward justice, toward reason, not by force, but by natural unfolding. He influenced fields far beyond philosophy, education, anthropology, psychology, even political science. For a time, he was among the most read thinkers in the English-speaking world. But time has not been entirely kind to Spencer. Some took his ideas and twisted them into cold justifications for cruelty, inequality, and empire. Yet behind the distortions was a mind truly seeking unity. A man who dreamed of understanding life not in fragments, but as a rising tide of purpose. Herbert Spencer gave voice to the age's deepest faith, that beneath all the noise, the universe was evolving. Chapter 10. Friedrich Nietzsche, the prophet of strength. And then, like lightning striking a crumbling cathedral, came Nietzsche. He was not a builder. He was a breaker, a prophet of fire, not order. Where Spencer saw progress, Nietzsche saw decline. Where others sought comfort, he sought truth, even if it burned. He declared, God is dead, not with joy, but with dread. He wasn't announcing victory. He was ringing an alarm. For centuries, the West had built its morality, its hope, its meaning upon God. And now, that foundation was crumbling. What would rise in its place? Nietzsche looked into the abyss and did not blink. He challenged everything. Christianity, democracy, morality, science, even philosophy itself. To him, conventional morality was a morality of the herd, obedient, fearful, weak. He called it slave morality, born of resentment, envy, and denial of life. He dreamed of the Übermensch, the overman, not a tyrant, but a creator, a being who makes his own values, who dances beyond good and evil, who says yes to life, not in comfort, but in courage. He spoke in aphorisms, fragments of fire. He wrote like a poet, a hammer, a storm. He revered strength, not of violence, but of vision, the strength to stand alone, to suffer deeply, to will meaning into existence. And thus spoke Zarathustra. He wrote a philosophical gospel, part myth, part parable, all thunder. Yet Nietzsche's life was marked by pain. Illness haunted him. Loneliness followed him. He walked alone through forests, mountains, cities, thinking, always thinking. And eventually, he broke. At age 44, his mind collapsed. He spent the last years of his life in silence, cared for by his sister, watching the world from behind a curtain of madness. But his words never fell silent. He influenced writers, artists, psychologists, revolutionaries. He was claimed by the left and misused by the far right. He was misunderstood, quoted out of context, feared, adored, and rediscovered. Nietzsche was not a philosopher in the academic sense. He was a diagnostician of culture, a seer of soul, a destroyer of illusion. And though he did not give us peace, he gave us provocation. He asked us to face the void and create. Chapter 11. Henri Bergson, the philosopher of vital time. As the 20th century approached, the world was becoming a machine. Clocks ticked louder. Science marched faster. Thought grew more rigid, calculated, mechanical, measured in lines and numbers. But Henri Bergson stood against that current. He believed reality was not a system to be dissected, but a stream to be felt. He turned philosophy from the abstract to the immediate, from analysis to experience. Where others saw time as a clock, Bergson saw duration, a flow, a pulse, a living rhythm. He called it la durée, not the time of physics, but of memory, intuition, emotion, time that bends and breathes, the time of music, of love, of consciousness itself. He believed that intellect is suited for matter, but intuition is suited for life. To truly understand the movement of being, we must feel it, not freeze it. At the heart of Bergson's thought was elan vital, the vital force, a creative energy surging through all of evolution. Not mere survival, but creation. Not repetition, but emergence. Life, to him, was not just adaptation, it was poetry in motion. He urged philosophy to return to lived experience, to the fluid, the mysterious, the inner, to break free from the illusion that all things can be measured and mapped. In a world increasingly drawn to cold logic, Bergson brought warmth. He influenced artists, poets, and thinkers. He reminded science of its soul and reminded philosophy of its blood. He won the Nobel Prize in Literature, not for what he proved, but for what he awakened. The sense that beneath the gears and graphs, life dances. And to truly know it, we must dance with it. And so this story, comes to its close. But philosophy has no final chapter. It is not a book to be finished, but a flame passed from mind to mind, from age to age, from the streets of ancient Athens to the silence of Amsterdam, from the rigor of Königsberg to the fire of Nietzsche's solitude, from Plato's realm of forms to Bergson's living stream. These thinkers did not just teach us what to know, they taught us how to wonder. They did not always agree. In fact, they often contradicted each other. But in that tension, they formed the great conversation of the human race. They asked, what is truth? What is good? What is beautiful? What is time? What is self? What is meaning? And though the answers shifted, the questions endured. They endured in books, yes, but more deeply in hearts, in restless souls who look up at the stars and ask, why are we here? Philosophy does not promise comfort. It offers awakening. It does not erase suffering. It helps us bear it, understand it, sometimes even transcend it. In a world of noise, philosophy invites silence. In a world of certainty, it plants questions. In a world obsessed with doing, it dares to ask, why? Now, the torch is in your hands. To read, to reflect, to live more deeply, more freely, more consciously. This is not the end. This is a doorway, because the story of philosophy is the story of us all. If this journey through the minds of history moved you, if these voices from the past stirred something within, then consider staying with us. Subscribe to the Tunnel of Sane, where thought meets feeling and stories seek depth. More paths await, more voices whisper, and this is just the beginning. Thank you for walking with us.